And I think in terms of what I was hoping to hear more about, though, about their revenue, I would have liked a little bit more color on its performance in direct response, because, of course, its lack of DR offerings was one of the reasons that its ad revenues declined in Q2 of last year.
Hey gang, it's Wednesday, August 4th. Jasmine and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. I'm Marcus. I'm so tired. I tried so hard at the beginning to sound. It's the morning. We don't normally record the show this early, so we'll get through it. Today I'm going to sound a bit subdued. I'm really into the episode. I'm exhausted. Today I'm joined by Jasmine Emberg. She is one of our senior analysts covering global trends.
Hey Marcus, hey everyone.
Hello there. Sorry, she is our senior analyst covering global trends is what I should say, because you're our not. You sounded like there's lots of you. There's one. Today's fact. So, 5 flamingo facts for you. Oh, didn't see that coming, did you, listeners? Flamingo chicks are born with grey and white feathers. They don't turn pink for a year or two, and their beaks are straight and begin to curve as they grow and mature. Number 1. Number 2, the colour pink comes from the beta carotene in the crustaceans and plankton that flamingos eat. Number 3, flamingos feed by stirring up mud with their legs. Then they reach down, they scoop up a beak full of mud and water, and their beaks, which are designed to strain animals out of the mud, and then the water is expelled. And this happens when the flamingo's head is upside down. Number 4, adult flamingos are 4 to 5 feet tall, but they only weigh between 4 to 8 pounds.
What?
That is an insane body density. Someone check. You guys might want to check that out. I'm almost certain that's true.
I was going to ask, Marcus, where are you finding this fact?
They're all fine up until then. I think I've lost people. They're like, these are rubbish. All right, if you're still with me, I've got one more for you. Keep an open mind. Flamingos bend their legs at the ankle. This is according to the National Aviary. You may have seen that flamingos bend their legs backwards. That's their ankle. Their knee is tucked up underneath their feathers near their body. I spent a lot of time reading about these things. Spent, wasted, one or the other. Anyway, today's real topic, Twitter and how they did in Q2. Today we're talking about Twitter. How many people did they add to their service? How much money did they make? And how will they do in the short term, in the near future? Let's start with the user highlights. In Q2, total monetizable daily active users, MDAUs as they call them, crossed the 200 million mark for the first time, reaching 206. Twitter added 7 million MDAUs in Q2, the same as they did in Q1, but lower than the 20 million they added last Q2 2020. In the US, MDAUs ticked down from 38 to 37 million. International MDAUs were up 7 million versus the 17 million they registered last Q2 2020. So Jasmine, we'll start as we have been with the earnings episodes with a letter grade and why.
So I'm going to give Twitter a B on users. Slower year-on-year user growth was expected. That 11% was exactly in line with what Twitter had prepared us for in their previous guidance. Obviously, the loss of that 1 million US MDAUs from Q1 got a lot of attention on the earnings call, but I don't think it's reason to be too concerned just yet. I think what it shows is that Twitter is still very dependent on news to drive usage. Q2 was a slower news cycle than we've had in previous quarters. But it's still really early for a lot of the new features that Twitter has been rolling out, so we probably won't see if they end up driving any engagement or any more engagement until later this year anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, then maybe it would be a bit unfair to say that this is a cause for concern or to ring the alarm bells this early on. I mean, they've been growing every quarter pretty much, at least for the last couple of years, 28, 29, 30, 31, 33, 36, 36, 37, 38 million. So they've been ticking up the last 8 to 9 quarters or so, and then just down by 1 million this quarter. What features are you paying closest attention to when it comes to engagement? Because Twitter's added a fair amount. Are there any features you're looking at and saying that could really help either add new users or increase engagement with the current ones?
Well, so there's one feature that I'm really interested in, which is Twitter Blue. It's the subscription service that Twitter launched in Australia and Canada. We didn't get as much information as I would have liked on it during the earnings call. It's obviously still in testing phase, so we'll probably have to wait to get a clearer picture on how it's doing. There was one question about it during the question and answer session, but Dorsey's answer was super vague. But yeah, that's one I'm definitely paying attention to and I think could have some potential if and when they roll that out globally.
And that's the one where you pay some money and you get some extra features like the ability to retract tweets and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I could see them rolling out more sort of features within the Twitter Blue subscription in the future too.
Yeah, good point. Twitter said they added over 2,500 new topics in Q2. They now have close to 10,000 across 9 languages. Twitter said that 4 out of 10 new users in supported languages follow topics during the sign-up process, with about 14 apiece. And the Bank of America's position on Twitter's growth story was, while user growth will remain a question, we maintain our optimistic view that Twitter can increase its still very limited reach as a differentiated news and content platform with strong distribution on other media. We move to the revenue. How much did they make? Q2. Twitter crossed the $1 billion milestone for the second time in the company's history. The first was back in Q4 2020, 2 quarters ago. Twitter's total revenue nearly doubled from last year's Q2 number. By region, the US revenue, which accounts for just over half the money Twitter makes, that was up 98%. International revenue was up 70. Jasmine's shaking her head. International revenue was up 76%. Jasmine, what stands out to you, and letter grade, please?
So letter grade is an A. I mean, you saw me shaking my head just now. Obviously, this was a fantastic quarter for Twitter's ad business, but I'm not giving Twitter its A grade based on its year-over-year growth, but really based on the significant growth that it had from Q2 2019, because they had a really easy comparison to last year. It's also its strongest growth since 2014, which is definitely reason to celebrate. And I think in terms of what I was hoping to hear more about, though, about their revenue, I would have liked a little bit more color on its performance and direct response, because, of course, its lack of DR offerings was one of the reasons that its ad revenues declined in Q2 of last year. It did sound like there was a lot of demand from brand advertisers, which, of course, is the core of Twitter's ad business.
Yeah, Twitter, they were expecting close to 80% growth for the quarter. And when I heard that in Q1, I thought that's ambitious. But they still managed to beat that. So good job on Twitter. To your point, Twitter's ad revenue last Q2 was down 23%, whereas the Q2 before that, before the pandemic, 2019, it was 21% in the black. So yeah, this is a very unprecedented Q2 in terms of growth. I mean, they've been doing pretty well for the last couple of quarters. After that Q2 dip of 23%, they went 15% positive in Q3, then 31 in Q4, 32 in Q1 of this year, and then now 87. They jumped to 87, which is madness. Japan, they pointed out, is still their second largest market. They had booked revenue of $151 million, or 13% of total revenue. That was up 40% year on year. Q3 and Q4, Jasmine, what do we expect to see from Twitter?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the outsized growth that we saw this quarter likely won't continue. I think we'll see a slowdown in revenue growth. I think we may see similar user growth to this quarter, but either way, not as strong on the revenue side for sure.
Okay. Yeah, trying to figure out what they think of Q3 and Q4, but it seems like they were putting out some 2023 numbers. So they're looking a lot further down the road. They were saying that they're hoping of doubling their revenue by 2023. And on the user side, Twitter hopes to reach 315 million mDAUs by Q4 2023. That will be up from 206 that they have today, which is, very, very aggressive targets. But yeah, we shall see. That's all we've got time for the first half. It's time now for the halftime report, where we summarize the key takeaways from the lead story in 30 seconds or less. Jasmine, your takeaways from the first half are?
So I have 2. The first is that Twitter is clearly riding the wave of the strong comeback for the digital ad market. But like I said, the outsized growth in Q2 likely isn't going to be sustainable. And the second is that Twitter has big ambitions. You just talked about them, its growth plans for 2023. And as part of that, we're going to see it try many new things, some of which, like fleets, aren't going to stick, while others will.
That is all we have time for the lead story. It's time now for In Other News, but first, a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Retail's next competitive threat may come from a business model or channel that didn't even exist a few months ago. This modern dynamic requires companies to adapt quickly, pivoting business seemingly overnight, something traditional commerce platforms just can't support. There's a new enterprise commerce platform on the rise, one that's fast, flexible, and doesn't require 9 months and $1 million to get up and running. Go to vtex.com/emarketer to learn more. Folks, we are indeed back. Today in other news, Twitter is shutting down fleets. What do we expect to see from super follows and ticketed spaces? And Clubhouse removed the need to have an invitation to join its service. Story 1, Twitter is shutting down its Stories-esque feature called Fleets, which had launched less than a year ago. It turns out the disappearing posts fleets weren't producing enough user engagement to keep it around, notes Sarah Fisher of Axios. Jasmine, your thoughts on fleets being folded?
It was only a matter of time, in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, fleets never felt like a match for the way people communicate on Twitter. And clearly now it's people didn't use it. And Twitter has so many other projects in the works that it just makes sense for them to focus their resources on building out features that may actually spur usage and revenues.
Yeah, they did need, as you mentioned, they're doing a lot, but they do need to experiment. Time spent on Twitter, they've got a 6-minute boost by the pandemic. It's now at 32 minutes a day, but it's flat going forward. Might tick down by a minute or two in the next couple of years. Megan Bobrovsky of the Wall Street Journal was noting that for Twitter, Fleets was meant to address some of the anxieties that hold people back from tweeting. Instead, it was used mostly by people who already tweet to amplify their own content and talk directly to others. Story 2. In June, Addy Robertson of The Verge wrote that Twitter was selecting a small group of users to test its new monetization features, superfollows and ticketed spaces. Superfollows lets folks charge $3, $5, or $10 a month for access to exclusive content. Ticketed Spaces lets them charge between $1 to $999, I don't know why it's not $1,000, for access to one of Twitter's social audio rooms, offering extra features like setting a room size cap. Jasmine, what do you make of the potential impact these two features could have for Twitter?
So there's obviously been an intense push from Twitter and all of the other social platforms to find ways to help creators to monetize, and subscriptions is part of that. I think what's interesting here is that from my conversations with creators, feelings towards subscriptions are actually really mixed. Some say that it could bring in additional revenue, while others are pretty hesitant about charging users for content because it could alienate a large number of their followers. And I think there's a reason why Twitter's product is called Super Follows. It is designed to appeal to a smaller set of super fans.
Yeah, at the end of June, TechCrunch reported that developer Alessandro Paluzzi has spotted that Instagram might be working on subscriber-only stories that could look a bit like Twitter's Superfollows, called exclusive stories. When you try to watch an exclusive story without being a fan of a person sharing, there's a pop-up that says only fans can watch. At the time, Instagram confirmed the developer's screenshots were from an internal prototype and that it's not currently testing anything right now. Story 3. Social audio platform Clubhouse will now let the 10 million folks on its waitlist join the app, notes The Verge, and anyone else who wants to, after they removed the need to have an invitation first. Jasmine, how big of a deal is this, and can this give Clubhouse an extra tailwind?
So a big part of Clubhouse's appeal was its novelty and exclusivity, and now that nearly every major social app is working on a live audio product of its own, it's not so novel and it's not so exclusive anymore. Even if this lets Clubhouse scale successfully, I think it's going to start to look very different from what it was originally when it opens up the doors to everybody. I mean, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it sort of reminds me of when Facebook started to change after it opened its doors to everyone and not just college students back in 2006. It's a completely different platform than it was when it first began.
Yeah, it's a good point. They're trying to do a lot to add people and to kind of fend off some of the competition. They introduced a direct messaging feature recently called Back Channel. 90 million messages apparently sent, 90 million sent over the course of the week that they launched that. They launched on Android in May. However, Ariel Pardes of Wired said the app had around 500,000 new installs globally between July 21st and the 25th, according to analytics group Sensor Tower. It's a 17% increase from the previous 5-day period, mostly from outside the US. So yeah, the crowd's changing, and it looks like it's becoming more of an international crowd. On Apple's App Store, Clubhouse ranked 10th among apps in the category of free social networks on the first day open to the public. Downloads of Google's Duo were higher, if you remember what that is. On Android, it barely cracked the top 20, the article noted. On July 14th, Clubhouse reported it had 10 million active weekly users. Weekly is an interesting metric to use. Quite like it, actually. Anyway, that's what we've got time for this episode. Thank you so much to Jasmine for hanging out.
Thanks, Marcus. Now you can go take a nap.
I'm so tired. Thank you to Victoria who edits the show. Thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you guys tomorrow, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. Flamingos are the best. Just, have you seen them walk recently?
I have. Well, not recently, but there's no flamingos in Finland. But I have seen them walk at some point in my life.